Let's bring back to the show Ned Ryan and Tommy Lahren. Tommy, this is a goosebump moment. What's your reaction to this?
Well, I'll tell you, Liz, this is American exceptionalism at its finest. And I would hope that all Americans watching this can celebrate and cheer for that American exceptionalism. And they can put their newfound hate and disdain for the great innovator, Elon Musk, aside and celebrate what we're seeing right now. It's fantastic to see people come home. It doesn't matter who brought him there, but I think we do have to remember who that was, love him or hate him, on the left. I hope you celebrate with us.
This is a time to cheer America, cheer the White House, cheer Elon Musk. This is exciting, Ned Ryan. Your thoughts?
Well, great call by Trump to allow Elon to bring these astronauts home safely after the 9 months being stranded up there. But Liz, it's also a triumph of common sense. I mean, Trump looked at the situation, realized Elon had a solution, said, go do it. Make it happen.
They're splashing down now. Look at this. The images are so exciting. They're about to splash down. The parachutes have been deployed. This is an 8-day mission, Ned. It turned into an agonizing 9-month stay, and it stretched out. And they were stranded up there. Here they go. They're about to splash down at any second, Ned. Exciting stuff.
Well, I think we need to appreciate the age in which we live, in which we have a generational titan with Elon Musk joining with a true colossus of American politics, Donald Trump. And I hope ushering in not only, again, as Tommy said, just this celebrating this exceptionalism, but a golden age, a new age of American exceptionalism.
So what Ned just said, Tommy, should Democrats start applauding Elon Musk and celebrating Elon Musk instead of attacking him, Tommy? Let's listen in.
Liz, they're unable to do that. We all know that. I feel for them because they have such derangement that they can't even celebrate wins for America. But it doesn't really matter. We will celebrate in their place and in their honor. This is a great day for these astronauts. This is a great day for America, for Elon Musk. And there's more to come. And it's also a reminder that when you unshackle innovators, you get great innovation. Imagine that. And that's exactly what we're seeing tonight.
Let's listen in what the communications are now. Listen.
You can see the crew there using their restraints as resting places for their arms. They were just in space moments ago, so their arms were able to float freely.
400 meters.
This is a gorgeous bluebird day here that we have for the splashdown of Crew 9. It's incredible to think that the Dragon capsule just minutes ago was going over 17,000 miles per hour and now gently coasting to a soft splashdown. 200.
Copy, 200 meters. Brace for splashdown.
Under progress of the Dragon spacecraft. And we're going to stand by for splashdown located in the Gulf of America off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida.
And splashdown. Crew 9 back on Earth.
President Trump addressed attendees of the Digital Assets Summit this morning, saying that America is now poised to become the crypto capital of the world. It was the first time a sitting president addressed a crypto conference. In a video message, the president touted his recent moves related to crypto, including his executive order creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The order, signed earlier this month, also established a U.S. digital asset stockpile managed by the Treasury Department, which holds other confiscated cryptocurrencies. The president said that the move would allow the federal government to maximize the value of its holdings instead of, quote, foolishly selling them for a fraction of their long-term value. He went on to say that his administration is ending what he called the last administration's regulatory war on crypto, adding that he has urged Congress to pass landmark legislation which would create simple, common-sense rules for stablecoins and market structure.
With the right legal framework, institutions large and small will be liberated to invest, innovate, and take part in one of the most exciting technological revolutions in modern history. It's so big, it's, I think, as big as you can get. Pioneers like you will be able to improve our banking and payment system and promote greater privacy, safety, security, and wealth for American consumers and businesses alike. You will unleash an explosion of economic growth, and with the dollar-backed stablecoins, you'll help expand the dominance of the U.S. dollar, and many, many years to come, it'll be at the top, and that's where we want to keep it. We only want to keep it at the top, always. Today, we take a very historic action that was 45 years in the making. In a few moments, I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education once and for all. And it sounds strange, doesn't it? Department of Education, we're going to eliminate it, and everybody knows it's right. And the Democrats know it's right, and I hope they're going to be voting for it, because ultimately it may come before them, but everybody knows it's right, and we have to get our children educated. We're not doing well with the world of education in this country, and we haven't for a long time. And we're pleased to be joined today by the woman who I chose because she's an extraordinary person, and hopefully she will be our last Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. Linda, thank you. Thank you very much. When President Carter created the Federal Education Department in 1979, it was opposed by members of his own cabinet, as well as the American Federation of Teachers, the New York Times editorial board, and the famed Democrat Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. History has proven them right, absolutely right. After 45 years, the United States spends more money on education by far than any other country, and spends likewise by far more money per pupil than any country, and it's not even close. But yet we rank near the bottom of the list in terms of success. It's an amazing stat. Those are two stats you don't want. The most money spent per pupil, and you're at the bottom of the list. And that's where we are, like it or not. And we've been there for a long time. 70% of 8th graders are not proficient in either reading or in math. 70%. 40% of 4th graders lack even basic reading skills, can't read. Students in our public elementary and middle schools score worse in reading today than when the department opened, by a lot. In Baltimore, 40% of the high schools have 0 students who can do basic mathematics. Not even the very simplest of mathematics. I said, give me your definition of basic, and they're talking about like adding a few numbers together. Despite these breathtaking failures, the department's discretionary budget has exploded by 600% in a very short period of time, and it employs bureaucrats in buildings all over Washington, D.C. And as a former real estate person, I will tell you, I ride through the streets of Washington and it says Department of Education, Department of Education. I said, how do you fill those buildings? It's crazy what's happened over the years. I'm pleased to report that after offering these federal employees 2 generous buyout options, and they were very generous, and they're good people, but they were very generous. My administration has initiated a reduction in force, and we're already cutting numbers that were really surprising to a lot, that we were able to do it so successfully. And we've cut the number of bureaucrats in half. 50% have taken office, which is great. Thank you. Under the action I'm taking today, a small handful of Democrats and others that we have employed for a long time, and there are some Republicans, but not too many, I have to be honest with you. But the department's useful functions, and such as, and they're in charge of them, Pell Grants, Title I funding, resources for children with disabilities and special needs will be preserved, fully preserved. They're all going to be so. If you look at the Pell Grants, supposed to be a very good program, Title I funding and resources for children with special disabilities and special needs, they're going to be preserved in full and redistributed to various other agencies and departments that will take very good care of them. And it's very important to Linda, I know, and it's very important to all of us. But beyond these core necessities, my administration will take all lawful steps to shut down the department. We're going to shut it down and shut it down as quickly as possible. It's doing us no good. We want to return our students to the states where just some of the governors here are so happy about this. They want education to come back to them, to come back to the states, and they're going to do a phenomenal job. You know, if you look, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, I have to tell you, I give them a lot of credit. China's top 10. And so we can't now say that bigness is making it impossible to educate, because China is very big. But you have countries that do a very good job in education. And I really believe, like some of the governors here today, from states that run very, very well, including a big state like Texas, but states that run very well are going to have education that will be as good as Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and those top, Finland, those top countries that do so well with education. I think they'll do every bit as well. And what do you think about that, Governor? Do you agree? I think so. Ron, do you agree? I think so. Florida? Iowa? That's right. I really believe that. They'll be as good as any of them. It was very lucky. I saw another document that turned out to be very good for the country, and I said, let's use that same pen. I don't know, is anybody superstitious? Ron? Let's use that same pen. For a reason today that is very exciting, and I'm thrilled to announce that at my direction, the United States Air Force is moving forward with the world's first sixth-generation fighter jet. Number sixth generation. Nothing in the world comes even close to it, and it'll be known as the F-47. The generals picked a title, and it's a beautiful number, F-47. It's something the likes of which nobody has seen before in terms of all of the attributes of a fighter jet. There's never been anything even close to it, from speed to maneuverability to what it can have to payload. And this has been in the works for a long period of time. After a rigorous and thorough competition between some of America's top aerospace companies, the Air Force is going to be awarding the contract for the next generation air dominance platform to Boeing. As you know, it was highly competed for. There was a lot of competition, generals, and it's been going on for a long time. Very, very tough competition, but this plane is produced numbers that nobody's ever seen before. The F-47 will be the most advanced, most capable, most lethal aircraft ever built. An experimental version of the plane has secretly been flying for almost 5 years, and we're confident that it massively overpowers the capabilities of any other nation. There's no other nation. We know every other plane. I've seen every one of them, and it's not even close. This is a next level. You know, level 5 is good. This is level 6, they say. The F-47 is equipped with state-of-the-art stealth technology. It's virtually unseeable and unprecedented power. It's got the most power of any jet of its kind ever made. Maneuverability, likewise, is there's never been anything like it, despite the power and speed. Its speed is top. It's over 2, which is something that you don't hear very often. America's enemies will never see it coming. Hopefully we won't have to use it for that purpose, but you have to have it. And if it ever happens, they won't know what the hell hit them. A new fleet of these magnificent planes will be built in the air during my administration over the next couple of years. It's ready to go. They've already built much of what has to be built in terms of production, including the sheds. We'll ensure that the USA continues to dominate the skies. We've given an order for a lot. We can't tell you the price because it would give way to some of the technology and some of the size of the plane, good-sized plane. This contract also represents a historic investment in our defense industrial base, helping to keep America at the cutting edge of aerospace and technology. Our allies are calling constantly. They want to buy them also, and certain allies will be selling them, perhaps toned-down versions. We like to tone them down about 10%, which probably makes sense because someday maybe they're not our allies, right? But I would like to ask Secretary Hegseth, who's doing a fantastic job. He's really been very inspiring in so many ways, and I must say that before he speaks, we have had record people wanting to join our military in the last 2.5 months, literally since this, I think probably since the election, November 5th, but especially since we came to office and since I announced Pete. He's young, he's smart, he's strong, he loves it, and they love him. But we've had record numbers of people wanting to join our military. Now, if you go back 6 months, it was the exact opposite. You had record numbers of people not wanting to join the military. Now you have record numbers of people wanting to be in our military. And that's a great honor. That shows you we're really on the right track. So, Pete, maybe you'd say a few words.
Sure.
Please.
Well, Mr. President, this is a big day. This is a big day for our warfighters. This is a big day for our country, a big day in the world. The name of this program is the Next Generation of Air Dominance. And Mr. President, because of your leadership, your clarity, America is going to have generations in the future of air dominance because of this 6th generation fighter. We've had the F-15, we had the F-16, the F-18, the F-22, the F-35. Now we have the F-47, which sends a very direct, clear message to our allies that we're not going anywhere, and to our enemies that we will be able to project power around the globe unimpeded for generations to come. Mr. President, this is a gift to my kids and your kids, to my grandkids and your grandkids. This is a historic investment in the American military, in the American industrial base, in American industry that will help revive the warrior ethos inside our military, which we're doing, rebuild our military, which the previous administration did not do, by the way, Mr. President. They paused this program and were prepared to potentially scrap it. We know this is cheaper, longer range, and more stealthy. President Trump said we're reviving it and we're doing it. And then we are also going to reestablish deterrence. Under the previous administration, we looked like fools. Not anymore. President Trump has reestablished American leadership. The F-47 is part of it. And Mr. President, thank you for having the courage to do it and leading the way for all our warfighters.
Thank you very much, Pete. Waste and abuse.
President Trump holding his third cabinet meeting, this one behind closed doors. And though he is not a cabinet member, billionaire Elon Musk was front and center.
We had a very, very good cabinet meeting. We're on our way to some tremendous numbers.
Cameras let in at the end of the meeting. Earlier this month, at the cabinet's last convening, the president placed limits on Musk's authority. And according to reports, several cabinet members clashed with Musk's methods. Today, most secretaries praised Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency.
With Elon's help eliminating the redundancies, we are streamlining our department.
Musk's rapid-fire moves to shrink the federal government facing numerous legal setbacks. Today, the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court to block a ruling ordering it to reinstate thousands of probationary federal workers fired by D.O.G.E.
Well, this is an unprecedented action.
And in court this afternoon, before a federal appeals panel arguing the president can use the Alien Enemies Act, a centuries-old, rarely used law, to deport 5 Venezuelans. The administration spent much of the weekend attacking federal judge James Boasberg after he ruled that 5 of the deported men must get an opportunity to challenge alleged gang involvement. The president and allies calling him radical and say he should be impeached.
This is an out-of-control judge, a federal judge trying to control our entire foreign policy, and he cannot do it.
It takes 2/3 of the Senate to impeach. We know that's not going to happen.
When we fight, we win!
The administration also facing backlash for a number of its moves: federal worker firings, postal service changes, tariffs, and Teslas. Anger across the country as the president pushes ahead with what he calls his revisioning of the federal government. And there is new scrutiny tonight at the White House on how the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine was added to an encrypted messaging app that included the likes of Vice President J.D. Vance and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. National Security Advisor Michael Waltz apparently adding the editor-in-chief to the thread that discussed sensitive material, including war plans. The National Security Council says they were reviewing the matter.
The U.S. will impose a 25% tariff on any country that buys oil and gas from Venezuela. The administration reports the Venezuelan government is sending gang members into the U.S. Here's Erica Brown.
The Trump administration says it's extraditing 3 Venezuelan migrants with alleged ties to the Tren de Aragua gang who were detained as part of the Alien Enemies Act.
We're getting the bad ones out first, and we're taking them out. And there's some really bad ones, murderers.
The administration is appealing a judge's temporary block of the president's use of the Alien Enemies Act, which allows for quick deportations without due process.
We're now not even just getting the worst of the worst out. We're making sure that there's consequences for being here and committing crimes in our communities.
Sunday night, the administration carried out more deportations directly to Venezuela without invoking the Wartime Act after reaching a deal with that country. During a cabinet meeting Monday, President Trump praised efforts to secure the southern border and to slash the size of the government.
Our country was riddled with fat, like no country probably anywhere in the world, and we're getting rid of the fat.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announced plans to do away with the agency tasked with helping people after a natural disaster strikes.
We're going to eliminate FEMA, so we've got a lot to do.
The Trump administration is also appealing a court order to rehire more than 16,000 federal workers laid off during their probationary period, asking the Supreme Court to step in. Erica Brown, CBS News, the White House.
I want to ask you about D.O.G.E because it's got Washington, D.C. in a tizzy. I want to get your sense of how confident you are, just seeing what they've done so far, that maybe $1 trillion is within sight.
I think it's incredibly in sight. But what I worry about is both parties. I think Washington's crooked as a dog's leg, and that in Washington, the money's going to come back to somewhere. You're going to see that paper trail, and I think that's when you're going to see, and I told Elon Musk this, and I told President Trump, I think you've got 100 and 150 days before members of both parties start pulling out on you, because, Charles, it's going to start hitting close to home. Elon has a paper trail, and members are getting nervous, and that's why I don't think we're bringing any of these great findings to the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate, and nobody wants to, apparently, because they're afraid it's going to cut into their pocketbooks. And America better wake up and realize we've been given a gift. We have a chance to take our country back. $36 trillion in debt.
Speaking of cutting into pocketbooks, you introduced a bill to ban stock trading by members of Congress and their families. And recently you posted a question, guess whether it makes the floor or not. My audience loves that. I love it. I just when I see these folks in Congress doing 1 million trades, they're making a lot of money. They're trading. They have insider information. It's crazy to me that we allow this to exist. What's the likelihood of that's ever coming to fruition?
I'd say about a snowball's chance in hell has a better. It won't. Charles, listen. I've got a used to be $11,000 portfolio. My buddy Tommy Siler manages for me. It's up to $13,000 portfolio. It's a mutual fund. That's what everybody ought to be in. These people are not clairvoyant. Everybody wants to knock on Pelosi, and I knock on her too, but I don't even think she's in the top 10 of stock traders. You can go on these websites, Unusual Whales, you can trace it. let's be honest. We're going to talk real tough. We'll go home to our Reagan Day dinners, and I'm sure the Democrats go to their Truman Day dinners, and they talk real tough. Then they come right back up to Washington, and they get fat and sassy. That's exactly what happens. And America needs to wake up again. I'd call my legislators and say, where are you at on this issue? We should make a sacrifice to be in Congress. It's an incredible honor. More people have played in the dadgum major leagues than have been elected to the United States Congress. And we need to start treating it as that.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be a vacation home. It should be a place where we make this country a better place. And America does not trust Congress for good reason.
Yeah.
Tensions between DOGE and government-funded entities they're trying to overhaul seems to be rising. Hey, that's the name of the show. In this instance, it's the U.S.'s Institute for Peace.
DOGE tried to gain access to the U.S. IP building, but were initially denied. Then days later, DOGE came back with D.C. police escorts.
When DOGE first appeared at the U.S. IP building, per the Washington Post, they presented a document showing that then acting U.S. IP president had been fired. U.S. IP released a statement at the time reading, on the afternoon of Friday, March 14th, 2025, several members of the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, arrived at the United States Institute of Peace, unannounced by two FBI agents. They were met at the door by the Institute's outside counsel, who informed them of USIP's private and independent status as a non-executive branch agency. Following that discussion, the DOGE representatives departed. Then, after DOGE was able to get into the building with the MPD escorts, DOGE wrote on X, Mr. Moose denied lawful access to Kenneth Jackson, the acting USIP president. D.C. police arrived on site and escorted Mr. Jackson into the building. The only unlawful individual was Mr. Moose, who refused to comply and even tried to fire USIP's private security team when said security team went to give access to Mr. Jackson.
MPD said in a statement that officers responded to a call for service of unlawful entry on Monday. MPD added that they didn't arrest anyone and that people had left the building without incident.
President Trump had signed an executive order in February to either eliminate or dwindle certain agencies. The order for USIP was for expected termination. Moose and almost all other board members of the agency were fired on Friday, per multiple reports. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and National Defense University President Peter Garvin were the only ones who remained on board. White House spokesperson Anna Kelly told the AP yesterday, rogue bureaucrats will not be allowed to hold agencies hostage. The Trump administration will enforce the president's executive authority and ensure that his agencies remain accountable, missed that up both times today, to the American people.
Congressman Don Beyer wrote on Blue Sky yesterday, I was at USIP tonight to conduct congressional oversight over DOGE's break-in. I spoke with Acting President and CEO Moose. USIP is an independent, nonprofit entity, and I will work to stop DOGE's illegal power grab.
Congress passed legislation to create USIP in 1984, and Reagan signed it into law.
So these unelected bureaucrats, such as, in my mind, Elon Musk, who is he to say? And for that matter, who is the president to say? This is not a part of the executive branch of the government. 1984, law signed, passed by Congress, signed by Ronald Reagan, a Republican president. The USIP, the Institute of Peace, is not under the direct control of the president. What is he trying to do? What is he trying to do? That's the question. This is authoritarianism. He's trying, whether it has to do with the Park Service, whether it has to do with the Kennedy Center. You think the Kennedy Center, the problem here is that it's not serving the American people and that the president should have a say over what's happening here? If a Democrat were behaving this way, would you be okay with it? Honestly, if a Democrat were behaving this way, would you be okay with that?
I think that they should eliminate this agency by passing a law that does so while they control Congress. I don't think cuts via executive action are the way to go because they can be easily undone and will be undone by the courts, as has already begun to happen. I'm worried that Republicans are trying to implement the Elon Trump DOGE agenda in a way they know will backfire so that they can whine and complain that they've been thwarted by activist judiciary or the deep state. That said, I don't. What does the U.S. Institute of Peace accomplish?
That's what I was just going to ask you. Do you even know what they do?
I do not.
They have projects projects and programs that have to do with building peace. You know, when you and
They've
I...
done a very good job at this.
Pardon?
Several.
Who are you to say that they're not doing a good job? And if they're not doing a good job, I would have no problem with these, all of their projects, all of their programs being made public. All of us, which they probably are, by the way, and the American people having a chance to decide. I do not think Elon Musk coming in there and just saying, nope, it's out, or the president saying, no, we're eliminating it. And all this language about unelected bureaucrats, a lot of these unelected bureaucrats in all of these agencies are experts in their fields, people who have dedicated their lives to these programs, whether it has to do with park rangers, whether it has to do with low-cost housing, whether it has to do with helping consumers. These are people who are being villainized and demonized, unelected bureaucrats, as though they represent something, this deep state that's so awful. It's being replaced by a dark state.
How can you say that when you're so exercised about the threats to democracy and things not being decided democratically? The unelected bureaucrats' criticism is because these are people who do not have to stand for election, who are making decisions independent of what legislatures have authorized them to do, who are making
How
decisions.
do you know that they're making decisions that are different? First of all, we elect the president. We cannot be expected, the American people cannot be expected to elect the hundreds of thousands of people who are hired by people who are then appointed.
I mean, you like to go back to our founding documents. Our founders never imagined a federal government that would be hiring and employing so many thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. The
country was tiny, Robbie, compared to what it is now. It was a few colonies, okay?
Well, they didn't envision any of this being at federal power. They gave to the states so many of these powers, and
President Clinton eliminated 450,000 jobs. Eliminating jobs when any system becomes bloated is not an invalid concept. The issue is how is it done? And the idea that it's done by this unelected bureaucrat named Elon Musk, who just comes in there and starts cutting and breaks his way. Pardon?
He's the unelected.
He is absolutely the unelected bureaucrat. And you say, well, he's appointed by the president. Well, all of these people have been hired by the people who lead these agencies. It has to do with process. It has to do with the rule of law, Robbie. That's what's going on here. We can have legitimate conversations, high-minded conservatism, high-minded liberalism. They're both important, actually, to the American public discourse. And the idea of cutting back bloat is valid. But how this is being done is an authoritarian process, and that's the problem that we have
Congress
with all
would do
of
it, but they're not willing to do anything. Congress will never claw back government spending, will never reduce departments. They just voted to keep in power the exact Biden agenda, the exact Biden spending levels. Republicans did that. So there will never be any cutting that Congress willfully considers.
Clinton cut 450,000 jobs.
80,000 million years ago.
Only someone your age could possibly say that.
But
it was not 100,000 years ago.
It was a different political era. You know that, Marianne. It was
he didn't have to get Congress to go along with it. But he set it up. It was a deliberative process. That's the problem here. And you keep trying to get us away from that because the non-deliberative process is dictatorial. And you will not talk to me about that. You don't want to take on that conversation. And that's the conversation why I have to keep saying it, because you won't take me on that one, because really, and I do believe that if a Democrat was acting this way, I can't imagine that you as an American would not have a problem with that.
According to a new report, the Biden administration buried a study in order to justify their ban on liquefied natural gas export projects in 2024. That LNG ban, shutting that down. What can you tell us about that report?
Oh, extremely disappointed to see what was done. In fact, last night I was just reading the original report prepared by the Department of Energy in 2023 that clearly showed it was in Americans' interest to grow our LNG exports. It wouldn't impact domestic prices, and in fact, it would lower greenhouse gas emissions. That's what the report said, but the Biden administration had this all-of-government approach against climate change, which clearly wasn't really about climate change, or they would have supported things that were going to drive down greenhouse gas emissions. But for their political interests, or maybe the Jane Fonda TikTok on the Cameron Parish LNG terminal that was trying to get approved. In direct contrast to the results of that study, they initiated the LNG pause after that study was produced but never released.
New rule: the Trump administration and its elite squad of Marvel Universe mutant budget Avengers known as D.O.G.E. must tell us what happened to going after the military.
Let's check the military. We're going to find billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud and abuse. And, you know, the people elected me on that.
Well, today they reported back on what they found when they checked the military, and it wasn't hundreds of billions or even billions. It was $580 million out of a defense budget of almost $900 billion. You know, when they were talking about shrinking the government, I said, yeah, great, but the acid test will be if they go after the biggest bloat of all, obsolete weapons programs. So I was hopeful when in November, Musk wrote on X, some idiots are still building manned jet fighters like the F-35. Manned fighter jets are obsolete in the age of drones. Please, in the name of all that is holy, let us stop the worst military value for money in history, that is the F-35 program. Exactly, Your Excellence. But today, Trump announced, we're building a new fighter jet, the F-47, and Trump said, we put in an order for a lot. We can't tell you the price. So what happened to fighter jets are obsolete in the age of drones? Was that just the ketamine talking?
Right about him. I'm always right. It's like when I'm right, I'm right. And when I'm wrong, I could have been right. So I'm still right because I could have been wrong.
Governor Ron DeSantis is returning nearly $900 million in federal funds to Uncle Sam. That move coming after he met with Elon Musk and his D.O.G.E team on Friday. DeSantis saying, quote, for years, Florida has been trying to return federal funds to the federal government due to the ideological strings attached by the Biden administration, but they couldn't even figure out how to accept it back. Jackie DeAngelis is co-host of the Big Money Show on Fox Business. She joins us now. So great to see you,
Good
Jackie.
morning.
Thanks for coming in. So it's so put politics aside. The federal government has given a state nearly $1 billion. They saved the money and they want to give it back, and the government has no way of bringing it back.
Is that not the most wild thing you've ever heard? That there is no system, no pathway to return the money? No, we don't want your money. Right. You keep it, Ron DeSantis. But seriously, these were federal funds, and it was $878,112,000 to be exact, because we care 112.
Because you know numbers
yes.
and math.
And what's amazing about this to me is that Florida is able to be efficient, right? Everybody flocked there during COVID. There's no state income tax. People want to live there because it's a better lifestyle. And he's able to sit down and sort of doge within his own state and find ways to save money, to say, we're going to give this money back to the federal government. And he just had one conversation with Elon Musk. That's all that it took to say, OK, we'll take that money back. We'll take it back gladly. And you know that it's going back to the federal government, and it's not going to be wasted again, because there are, procedures in place to not do that. And what I love about this is red states, I think this is going to be a trend, and you're going to see them do it. Blue states are mad about D.O.G.E in general, and they don't want to see it in the federal government, let alone at the state level. But there are ways. Look, the state budget is like your household budget. At a certain point, you can say, this isn't working, we're wasting, we got to tighten up the belt, and we've got to find ways to save. Why can't we do that for the American taxpayers? DeSantis is doing it. Elon Musk is doing it. It can be done.
The Departments of Defense and Energy used blacklisted Chinese government supercomputers to help carry out more than 100 nuclear research projects. Oh, joy. That's according to reporting from the Daily Caller News Foundation. The projects were primarily conducted through American labs. These projects reportedly have a civil and a military application. One example, space weather modeling, which can satellite communications, which involves satellite communications.
So this would appear to be a national security threat, as China may stand to benefit from the research conducted in partnership with the US. Joining us now to share what he found in his investigative report is Philip Linzicki, an investigative journalist for the Daily Caller News Foundation. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So just sketch out exactly what is going on here, because I read your piece, and it seems to me that oftentimes these are joint research projects, I think, between the US and China, and the Chinese side is using these supercomputers, and there are security concerns from the American side about that. Is that correct?
That's correct. What we discovered was that there are at least 102 instances in the last few years in which either the Department of Defense or the Department of Energy had funded research projects that the majority of these, as you mentioned, involved U.S. national labs as the main, research entity on the U.S. side. And on the Chinese side, they had researchers that were connected to sanctioned Chinese supercomputing centers. And so really the main issue that we found was that while the U.S. entities are sanctioned from sending any type of U.S. origined items to these sanctioned entities, the workaround would be that they could potentially send information or items to China-based researchers working with them on these projects, and that those China-based researchers could then actually physically press the buttons on these sanctioned Chinese supercomputers, and that they could run simulations and conduct calculations for these research projects. And the concern is that not only would the information, the core research potentially benefit China's military, but that by feeding these supercomputers with these complex, data sets, we could be, sharpening their algorithms and giving them an edge.
Who is doing, what agencies, what U.S. authorities make the determination that these are blacklisted, that these are sanctioned? Because that would seem to be an issue if one aspect of our government is saying don't work with this institution, and some other aspect of our government is saying no, it's fine, go ahead. That seems not good. Who does the blacklisting and the sanctioning?
Good question. And so the answer is the Department of Commerce. And I would think that in these cases, these supercomputing centers in China were sanctioned for their role allegedly in helping the Chinese military with some type of nuclear weapons research. So it had something to do with nuclear weapons and their weapons of mass destruction programs. You would think that the Department of Commerce was not the original entity to make that determination and, scoop up that intelligence, that it has something to do with the Department of Defense, or another agency like, from the intelligence community figuring this out. But it was ultimately Department of Commerce that sanctioned them.
This man's accused of pointing a gun at another driver on I-4 in Volusia County. When deputies pulled him over, they say they found marijuana in the car and a pink and black handgun. Fox 35's Marie Edinger is joining us live tonight. So, Marie, deputies believe the man is in this country illegally.
I told you guys last week about the Brevard County Sheriff's Office being the first in the state or in the nation to use Florida's new law, making it a crime to enter the state of Florida if you're in the country illegally. Volusia County could be the next to use it. There's some disagreement about who almost ran who off the road, but the Volusia County Sheriff's Office arrest report says afterward, some gestures were exchanged, and then a man who called himself Wilton Vargas Jr. came out of the sunroof pointing a gun. After deputies stopped the car, they say Vargas told them he got to the U.S. 6 years ago by crossing the border from Mexico and now lives in Massachusetts. Illegal aliens found guilty of a felony face stiffer penalties in Florida than U.S. citizens. Vargas is facing a third-degree felony for pointing that gun. That normally means a prison term of up to 5 years in prison, but for illegal immigrants, the sentence is 5 years automatically. That's on top of the misdemeanor crime of being in Florida illegally at all, and another misdemeanor for possession of marijuana deputies say they found in the car. Florida's new laws were meant to align with President Donald Trump's goals for a crackdown on illegal immigration. The Department of Homeland Security announced last week ICE has arrested as many people in the first 50 days of the Trump administration as the agency did in the entirety of last year. I did reach out to the Department of Homeland Security about Vargas's arrest specifically and about the overall crackdown on illegal immigration. I'm waiting to hear back. In Volusia County, Marie Edinger, Fox 35 News.
France's Minister of Higher Education and Research is claiming that a French scientist was denied entry into the United States because of his opinions about the Trump administration. So this is a story that just broke. It is developing as we speak. And usually I wouldn't want to jump on a story like this, but it is really garnering a lot of attention. And so as it develops, we will update you on it. Here's what we know right now. And it's based on the exact statement that's been issued by France's Minister of Higher Education and Research. He says, I was told with concern that a French researcher who was going to a conference near Houston was banned from entering the US before being expelled. The researcher's phone contained exchanges with colleagues and friendly relations in which he expressed a personal opinion on the Trump administration's research policy. So according to a French newspaper, the incident took place on March 9th. The researcher was randomly stopped in Houston, Texas. They were in the United States specifically to attend this conference. So when the researcher was stopped by Customs and Border Patrol, the CBP found messages they didn't like on his phone. This is insane. According to one source cited by the French press, CBP said that the French researcher expressed hate and conspiracy messages, prompting an FBI investigation only for the charges to be dropped later. Okay, so let's pause right there. The charges were dropped, which means those messages didn't contain like plans to carry out some sort of like terror attack or something in the United States, or some kind of violent attack against Donald Trump. Right now, if there were messages indicating that, then obviously this individual would be facing some serious consequences, some serious charges, in addition to not being allowed to enter the United States. But obviously those messages didn't contain any type of threat or risk to anyone in the Trump administration. Now, another source said the scientist was banned due to messages that can be described as terrorism. So we should know more details about what those messages contained. I am not going to take anyone's word for it. I want to know what the messages actually said, because let's keep it real. If there was any indication that this researcher was here to cause harm, then obviously our government is in the right or has the right to deny entry. However, I'm not going to take anyone's word for it. I want to know what those messages said. The researcher's phone and computer were taken from him, and he was sent back to Europe the following day. And that's all we know about the story so far. So as it develops, we'll give you updates. But for now, this does not look good. Because if a French researcher, if any researcher is coming to the United States specifically for a conference, and they're denied entry simply because they are critical of the Trump administration, that is some authoritarian BS. We should foster the kind of environment where criticism of any elected official, any office holder, is acceptable. Like the vice president of the United States, in a speech that honestly I gave him credit for, before Europeans at the Munich Security Conference, absolutely skewered European countries for violating the freedom of speech and expression of their people.
Flashback. I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation. Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree. End of flashback.
And then we're going to turn around and we're going to punish French researchers for not being adequately friendly or adequately positive toward the Trump administration? That's insane.
To an exclusive Brian Moss investigation that is uncovering behavior within Denver Mayor Mike Johnston's administration that one critic calls toxic. The mayor and his top appointees have been using an encryption app to communicate for months.
They've used it to send and receive messages about immigration issues. Then those internal messages were intentionally deleted by the mayor's office. Brian Moss joining us with the latest on this investigation tonight.
And Brian, you say the mayor was directly involved with this.
The mayor was involved with this, along with 14 of his top advisors, appointees, and attorneys in his administration. Mike Johnston pledged to be a transparent mayor, said that was one of the fundamentals of his administration. But open records experts say what we've uncovered here was the opposite of transparency. Johnston's administration says their actions were because of President Trump and how his administration was dealing with Denver.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for inviting me to testify today.
When Mayor Mike Johnston testified before a congressional committee this month about immigration issues in Denver.
So if Denver can find a way to put aside our ideological differences long enough to manage a crisis we didn't choose or create.
There's something these congressional representatives didn't know.
It is deeply offensive to me.
CBS has learned Johnston and his administration had been using Signal, an encrypted messaging app, to communicate amongst themselves about immigration issues, and initially had set the app up to automatically delete their conversations.
It's unlawful, and it's breaking the law, and it deprives us of the rights we have as Coloradans to observe the conduct of public business.
Steven Zansberg, a Denver attorney specializing in First Amendment issues, reviewed what our investigation uncovered. Through open records requests, we obtained these text messages the mayor's director of strategic initiatives, Joshua Posner, sent on January 15th to multiple members of the mayor's administration, telling all of them the same thing. We're going to use Signal to communicate with Strikeforce so that communication remains encrypted and secure and messages auto-delete, wrote Posner. Please let me know once you have it downloaded so I can add you to the group. The Denver Strikeforce group messaging on Signal consisted of the mayor, his chief of staff, deputy chief of staff, and a dozen other appointees, including the city attorney, according to the mayor's office.
Pretty clear and unequivocal evidence that this was a deliberate, intentional effort to evade transparency by using self-deleting ephemeral messaging apps.
Zansberg believes what was done may have violated city data retention policies, suggesting these kinds of records are to be kept for 3 years. Strikeforce was the name given to the mayor's leadership group that was dealing with Denver's immigration crisis, a crisis that attracted the attention of this conservative legal group affiliated with the Trump administration, which sent this harshly worded letter to Johnston in late December, demanding information and internal communications on how city officials were responding to immigration issues. A spokesman for the mayor now conceding the Trump pressure is why they opted for encrypted auto-delete messaging. When President Trump took office in January, it was clear that there would be rapidly developing changes to the way the federal government interacts with cities that could have significant impacts on how Denver operates, said the spokesperson.
Concealing, hiding, I think that's what it's doing.
Jeff Roberts with Colorado's Freedom of Information Coalition says what we found undermines the spirit of Colorado's open records law, which allows the public to view public records.
The public needs to be informed about that story.
In another text conversation, the mayor's chief of staff, Jen Ritter, is asked, "Are you on Signal? Mind if we shift there?" "Yes, switch there," responds Ritter.
Giving the impression that we're doing something that we don't want the public to see.
Across the country, government leaders have been heavily criticized for using encryption apps to discuss public policy issues. Michigan even passed a law forbidding state employees from using apps like Signal that make messages disappear. And as recently as December, Denver's chief information security officer emailed the mayor's office, telling them apps like Signal were for personal use only. Please avoid using these applications for city work, wrote the city's top tech expert. The mayor and his office refused to be interviewed for this report. Instead, they provided a written statement saying the particular group was started in January for internal staff to easily keep track of and share information regarding federal actions that impact Denver under the new administration. The purpose of the group is solely for information sharing, not actionable directive, said the statement. The city says 2 weeks after the strike force group was created, the administrator turned off Signal's auto-delete function. A spokesperson for the mayoral administration disputes that they violated any data retention policies. And Karen and Michael, Denver Police Chief Ron Thomas and Manager Safety Armando Saldate were also invited and asked to be part of this Signal group. They both declined.
Immigration and border security continue to dominate the headlines as the Department of Homeland Security shared this post right here stating that President Trump and Secretary Noem will not allow criminal illegal aliens, including accused murderers, to be let loose on America's streets. This as an immigrant released by the Biden administration, now charged with killing a Georgia grandmother in a random attack. The murder suspect accused of strangling a Georgia mother of 5 in a random attack last week, now identified as a Honduran immigrant who came into the country illegally. He was caught and then released at the southern border by the Biden administration in March of 2021. That is according to information that Fox News obtained. This 21-year-old immigrant has also been the subject of a deportation order since July of 2023. That is according to the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That immigrant now charged with capital murder in the death of the 52-year-old mother of 5 and grandmother. Her body was found dumped in a wooded area, that is according to authorities. The grandmother's family told local media outlets that she said a man had been following her in the days before she was killed. Although authorities have not determined the suspect's connection to the grandmother, an arrest warrant states that the immigrant assaulted her, placing her in a chokehold, causing her to lose consciousness, and once unconscious, authorities say that the suspect allegedly told police he put both knees and his full body weight on her neck, leading to her death. The Department of Homeland Security told Fox News that the immigrant entered the United States illegally in March of 2021 and was arrested by the U.S. Border Patrol, saying, quote, he was issued a notice to appear and paroled into the country by the previous administration. A judge ordered him removed on July 11, 2023. On March 18, 2025, he was arrested by the Cobb County Police Department for capital murder and other crimes.
Is there anything that you think Trump has done right?
Yeah, I mean, I think cracking down on fentanyl, making sure our borders are stronger. Look, nobody thinks that illegal immigration is appropriate. And I happen to think we need comprehensive immigration reform. But I don't think that it's appropriate for people to be coming across the border illegally.
Which actually isn't a particularly surprising remark from Bernie Sanders, who, on immigration specifically, was the one thing he was a little bit to Hillary Clinton's right on, and which in ways I would argue would have made him a more appealing general election candidate.
I mean, it's also, just to cut across you slightly, but it's also because Sanders is of that old school part of the left that worries about illegal immigration causing lower wages, essentially,
right.
Removing the power of workers to campaign for better wages and conditions.
The big money is coming in on April 2nd, from April 2nd.
The next round of President Trump's tariffs will be reciprocal tariffs, which economists say threaten far more countries than his other trade policies.
Whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth.
But economists overwhelmingly agree that the move will hurt U.S. consumers with rising prices. Tariffs in general raise the price of everyday goods because companies pass the higher importing cost onto consumers. But reciprocal tariffs will amplify this effect because the policy will raise tariffs across so many more industries.
Tariffs tend to reduce entry by foreign companies. They don't find they're not going to have enough of a market to make it worth the investment to enter that market.
This would reduce the variety and reliability of products available to American consumers. But Trump sees reciprocal tariffs as a way to even the playing field.
Countless other nations charge us tremendously higher tariffs than we charge them. It's very unfair. We have been ripped off for decades by nearly every country on earth, and we will not let that happen any longer.
The idea of fairness never involved a comparison of tariff line by tariff line, because there were just so many more issues on the table in thinking about what is a fair deal.
The U.S. is one of 166 members in the World Trade Organization, and under WTO rules,
you have to offer all the members of the club your best rate, except you're willing to cut these special deals with friends. There is a presumption built into the World Trade Organization that lower rates overall are a good thing, not only for the world economy, but for individual countries.
Trump blames the imbalance in tariff rates for the growing U.S. trade deficit.
China's average tariff on our products is twice what we charge them.
Some economists point to the fact that the U.S. needs to run a trade deficit because other countries want to acquire dollar-denominated assets because those assets have historically been viewed as safe assets.
Some economic experts point to the federal budget deficit as another reason the U.S. consistently has such a big trade deficit.
That is a source of the need for borrowing from abroad.
Economists say they're generally not concerned about the trade deficit because debt isn't inherently bad. It just means the U.S. is borrowing from the rest of the world. But economists do watch the level of U.S. debt overall.
There is a case to be made that we need to reduce consumption relative to our income. How do we do it? Certainly not with bilateral tariffs.
That's because higher tariffs don't just reduce imports, they reduce exports too. When imports go down because tariffs make it more expensive for American companies to buy foreign goods, there are fewer dollars in foreign markets, driving up the dollar's value. This makes American exports more expensive for trade partners, so they buy less of them. In the end, imports and exports both go down, leaving the deficit unchanged. According to economists, another reason why reciprocal tariffs won't reduce the trade deficit is because companies often shift their supply chains to other countries to avoid high tariffs.
We have reduced our trade with China, but we still need the things that we used to get from China. Companies that make footwear have turned to subcontractors in Vietnam to avoid the high tariffs that were placed under the first Trump administration. This happened for a lot of different goods, and altogether you saw the U.S. trade deficit with Vietnam growing. You will be like playing whack-a-mole. You will try to close the deficit on one country, and it will just pop up for another country.
Trade experts say that implementing reciprocal tariffs will be logistically complicated because there are thousands of items that are affected by tariffs, and the U.S. has nearly 200 trading partners. Some economists argue that reciprocity doesn't make sense as industrial policy.
Whatever they're charging, we're charging. Very simple.
What it does is it gives other countries the right to set our tariff rates. So if another country wants to protect something that we don't feel we need protection, something that we're really good at, we adopt their tariff rate because we retaliate against them if they won't lower their tariff rate.
U.S. stock futures pushing higher today on reports that the Trump administration's coming wave of tariffs will be more targeted than the barrage that the president has occasionally threatened. According to reporting from Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal, it's a sign of relief for markets gripped by this anxiety, crippled in some cases, and you can merge the two words together if you'd like to, like I did. But ultimately, that anxiety has knocked around Wall Street because of the threat of an all-out tariff war. Joining us now to discuss how this will all play out, we've got Peter Harrell, who is a non-resident fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for the International Peace. He previously served as Senior Director for International Economics and Competitiveness in the National Security Council during the Biden administration. Great to have you here with us this morning. So, this is what we had been discussing, and the mindset around the Trump administration potentially being more targeted than just wide-ranging and sweeping tariffs. How should we be thinking about this now going forward, and for what CEOs have been trying to do in making sure that they're clear of some of the tariffs that are coming forward?
Well, thanks for having me on this morning. I keep two things in mind when I think about the Trump administration and tariffs. First being, as we've seen over the last 2 months, nothing's final till the president says it's final. So we're clearly seeing a shift in tone out of administration officials speaking to the press, out of administration officials you talk to privately. But I do think we have to keep in mind nothing's going to be final until April 2nd, when the president actually rolls it out. With that big caveat, we do see some evidence that at least the cabinet, at least the senior members of the administration around the president, are now planning for a somewhat narrower set of tariffs on April 2nd than we had been hearing about a couple of weeks ago. Though it's important to understand that this is still a quite broad set of tariffs, just not as kind of spectacularly broad as it could have been a couple of weeks ago. I think we see two big changes, again, in terms of the messaging coming out of the administration. So the first thing is they're talking about imposing these quote unquote reciprocal tariffs only on a subset of America's trading partners. Now, these are going to be America's biggest trading partners. They're talking about doing it on, countries like Vietnam, on some of the European countries that are our biggest trading partners. So while it will be a subset of our trading partners, it will be a large share of trade. The other thing, two important things they're talking about, is it looks like the potential rate might be a little bit lower than the sort of 25-30% some of us had been thinking a couple of weeks ago. So we might be seeing a somewhat lower rate. And then they're making clear that they will not, at least for now, probably be stacking sectoral tariffs on top of these reciprocal tariffs. And just to briefly give a sense of what that means, if you have stacked tariffs and you have a 25% metal tariff and a 20% reciprocal tariff, that's actually a 45% tariff. And they're now talking about putting that on hold, but still expecting some big announcements on April 2.
Who is behind these headlines that we're getting on tariff changes from the White House, Peter? And I ask because I think it's important for investors to know whether President Trump actually does care what the market's doing and therefore is walking back his tariff policies behind closed doors, or if this is just the economic side of the White House trying to appease the market and this is kind of much ado about nothing.
I think this is the big question. I mean, just in the last couple of days, we've definitely seen National Economic Council Director Hassett. We've seen Treasury Secretary Bessent all talk about the narrower scope. We've also seen some information that I think has been attributed to Secretary Lutnick over at Commerce, who, of course, has been a major hawk within the administration. So we're definitely seeing this out of multiple points in the cabinet. That said, I think you are making exactly the right point. We don't know that this is going to be narrower until we actually see what the president says. And I use the Canada and Mexico tariffs as an example, where some of the economic side of the House had not wanted 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Trump brought them into force. There was a bad market reaction. They then pulled back. So I think the market is resonating, but whether it has really gotten through to the president himself, I think remains a bit TBD.
Tariff fears putting pressure on real estate developers as construction costs are moving higher. Robert Frank joins us right now with more on this story. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Becky. Good to see you. Well, building contractors already raising prices as much as 20% on fears of tariffs, and that could make housing even less affordable. The CEO of Related Group telling me that general contractors and subcontractors are hiking prices in anticipation of further tariffs.
We're seeing subs throw in additional cushion into their numbers, anticipating tariffs.
Is it like 5%, 10%, 20%?
No, it could be as much as like 20%, depending on what material they're getting from what country.
Raising prices
yes.
for certain things. The National Association of Home Builders estimates that tariffs on lumber, steel, aluminum, and other building materials could raise the cost of a new home by as much as $10,000. The trade wars with Mexico and Canada also hurting potential sales. Related's chairman, George Perez, told me that some buyers from Mexico and Canada are canceling contracts to buy condos in Florida.
We had a project in which we lost, I think it was 7 or 8 Canadian and Mexican buyers that are ready to sign the contract. And when all these things came from the tariffs, and they felt that they didn't want to buy, So it's that uncertainty.
You can watch the full interview with a related group on CNBC's Inside Wealth. Go to cnbc.com/Inside Wealth. That's cnbc.com/Inside Wealth. We forget that Canadians are the largest foreign buyers of U.S. real estate. They purchased $6 billion worth of homes last year. So this will be a question of which they dislike more. Most of them buy in Florida. Do they dislike Trump or Canadian winters more? This will be the question.
They're also the biggest tourist group visiting New York City.
Where does Mexico come?
Mexico's the third largest.
Who's second?
China.
Markets getting some relief as the White House offers a more targeted approach to its April 2nd Liberation Day tariffs, as first reported by Bloomberg. Joining me now, Yahoo Finance's Washington correspondent Ben Werschel. Ben, thanks for being here. Great to see you as always. Yeah. Also my Capital Gains co-host. Yeah. What exactly has changed here for April 2nd?
Yeah, so what I tried to write about in a story coming for Yahoo Finance today is it's sort of, this is obviously a real market boost, but it really kind of all depends on how you define narrowing. This is an effort that stretches all the way back to last week. Kevin Hassett last week had some comments about just a few countries being targeted. Scott Besson had an idea of the dirty 15% of nations that they're targeting. The problem here is that 15% or those just a few countries make up the vast majority of America's trading partners. Even the Trump administration released a federal notice back to start this whole process in February that noted they're looking at countries that make up 88% of America's trading partners. However, it's about 20 countries, but that represents basically the entirety of U.S.'s trading partners. So the question here is exactly whether they're going to narrow on those. And if you narrow it down to those, it's still sort of all U.S. trading, and there's still a signal that they're planning to do big duties on those countries when they come in. The other element of this in the reporting over the weekend is that sector-specific duties may be delayed, and that would be a big concession in terms of certain sectors like pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, things like that. The other part of that, though, is that a lot of these may have had to been delayed for legal reasons. What this process that's ending next week is about nations, and then a lot of these other ones may require comment periods, may require their own investigations before the tariffs are coming into place. So the core of the Trump idea, I think, is still intact here, even though there's definitely been this messaging effort to sort of talk about narrowing.
And Ben, the question that I'm kind of obsessed with today is the root of the reporting on this tariff shift from the Trump administration. Is this coming from the president's mouth? Is this an idea that the president does care about the market, or is it his economics team doing some damage control? It's
definitely the latter for right now. It's the economics team. This is sort of a process that's been going on from this in response to these market jitters. This reciprocal day, this reciprocal tariff day. Trump has called it Liberation Day and sort of been all in on it. He did offer a little bit more market-friendly commentary on Friday, talking about he had some flexibility. He seemed to be talking about company-specific there, so it could be a good sign for specific sectors. I would also note, I think it is notable that he hasn't knocked down these reporting over the weekend yet, at least as of a couple minutes ago. This was not the case in previous ones. Anytime there was a headline that sort of suggested he was backing away from his tariff plans, he was quick to post that was wrong, fake news, blah, 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 and that he has not done that yet. It could happen any minute. But that's notable here that he's not immediately reacting to the idea of a kind of narrowing idea, which markets clearly like.
Swear to God, if I ever see a MAGA person in a Mexican restaurant, because you cannot tell me that you voted for people who, whether they are citizens or not, to get deported out of this country to Mexico, and also voted for tariffs against Mexico, where we get a large majority of our produce, especially avocados, you can't enjoy Mexican restaurants if you voted that way. You cannot go with your little girly pops and get chips and queso and margaritas and be like, this and girl time. Like, no. You don't get to do that. You lost that right to do that.
Did you eat a lot of paint chips when you were a kid?
You do not get to enjoy Mexican food, Mexican culture, anything related to Mexico if you voted for Donald Trump. If you voted for Donald Trump, you do not get to enjoy an all-inclusive resort in Tulum or, I don't know, fucking Cancun or anywhere else in Mexico. You do not get to do that. You should not be allowed to do that. I think Mexico should be able to pull and see how did you vote. And if you voted for Donald Trump, you are not allowed in their country because you do not get to benefit off of Mexican culture and Mexican experiences, including Mexican travel and vacations, when you voted for Donald Trump. You don't. You can't vote against people and a culture that you want to take advantage of because you're a rich white person. No, it's not how it works.
We are living in some very dark times, and it's only going to get darker. With the deportation of immigrants, nobody will be here to work the fields. And everything that are in the fields will rot.
You serious?
There'll be no food.
Dumbass. Dumbass.
Inside.
Foreclose that Tristan Law. At Bold 3 Detergent Plus Fabric Softener.
This is specifically to Jeremy that sent me a inbox. And you know I'm talking about you. You gave all that rant and riffing and raving. She's smart. She went to a university. She got her own law firm. She got her own law firm. Let's talk about some numbers. Let's talk about some financial disclosures. Now, her law firm, Crockett Law Firm PLLC, filed $26,000 of earnings and $14,000 of earnings the year before. What kind of law firm are you running that you made $26,000?
You were only as good to me as the money you make, and right now it's not worth a hell of a lot.
For those of you who know anything about lawyers, and family law is probably the worst, and I don't know what law she's practicing, but I don't even want to tell you how much I paid. I paid almost $100,000. I'm still mad. In a custody case that I had, where it was no dispute other than money. Some people go all out for money. They want money. Almost $100,000. That's just me. And I don't know how much she paid. So that's two people that paid well over $100,000. Ma'am, you don't have two clients that you represent in anything? $26,000 is I don't know what to call that. It's probably laundering a little bit of money through that thing. She definitely ain't got a real practice that's bringing in any real business. But the real question is, before I play this video, is that where does she get her money from? I want to put this in context before y'all hear this fool talk about Elon Musk and crooked stuff and all that. How did you make your money for real, Miss Crockett? Because last time I checked, your salary is $174,000 as a House of Representative, which is the standard salary. It's estimated her net worth is $9 million from real estate and stock investments. And what is her stock investment portfolio? Because we got the financial disclosure right here. What is her investments in? An energy company, MGM Resort, and Moderna. How did she somehow become so successful in this?
You are so busted.
Somebody say insider trading. I would argue that she's probably doing a heck of a lot of insider trading, if you ask me. You look at her state income tax, or state salary, she filed $2,400. And the year before that, $55,000. She ain't making no money in any other earnings that we know of other than being a House of Representative. But then somehow she worth $8 million from stocks. And you go look at all of these House of Representatives, look at all of these people in Congress that are worth exponentially more money than when they started. What do they all got? Investment in day trading, not day trading, but putting their stuff in the market, probably insider trading. Let's roll what she had to say. Roll
As it relates to X, he has never made a profit since he bought X. In fact, the value of X is 75% lower than it has ever been. So if I am going to go look for somebody to run a business, I'm going to look for someone who is going to run one successfully. And before people start screaming and yelling about, well, he's a billionaire. Yeah, when you know the right people and they'll just give you money, then you can become a billionaire too. And maybe one day all of us will have that kind of access. But until...
Hold on. Shot it. You making the whole black race look bad. Put her ugly head back on there. You making all us look bad, sister. You can't be this silly. You went to college. You got a degree. You have a law firm. Are you this silly and don't know how business works?
Oh, there's a fucking surprise.
Tesla, he's never made a profit on X. I think she said Twitter, right? He never made a profit on Twitter. It's the lowest evaluation that it has ever had. If you had any common sense whatsoever, you know that when he bought X or bought Twitter, it was overinflated to start with. It wasn't worth $40 billion. They over-exaggerated it. There was a whole bunch of bots on the system. And he said this at the beginning. We all knew this at the beginning. But he decided that saving free speech was more important than this overinflated valuation of X. So we all knew it's a crap show. That's not about managing business. She has to be the dumbest person in the world.
Stupid, stupid, stupid.
Because you could just go to PayPal, you could go to Tesla, you could go to SpaceX, you could go down a list of the things that he developed. OpenAI, all of these are multi-billion-dollar companies. Tesla's a $1 trillion company. Ma'am, you picked Twitter that he acquired with other investors to act like he don't have a business acumen. The dude just rescued people from outer space.
That boy is good. Mm-hmm.
The husband of former Congresswoman and squad member Cori Bush has been charged with wire fraud related to small business loans he received during the pandemic. Federal prosecutors say Courtney Merritt filed fraudulent applications for COVID relief, securing tens of thousands of dollars in government aid. This is a copy of the indictment filed in D.C. federal court. According to the D.O.G.E, Bush's husband filed 2 Paycheck Protection Program loan applications in 2020 and 2021 for COVID emergency funds that were being offered to struggling small businesses. Here's some of the allegations made inside the indictment. Prosecutors say Merritt owned a moving business called Vetted Couriers and applied for an economic injury disaster loan with the SBA, using false representations with the intent to defraud. He received $8,500 for that loan on July 7, 2020. The day after receiving the loan, another loan application was submitted, but under a different business name, Courtney Merritt, named after himself. Prosecutors say that loan was rejected because it was nearly identical to his previous application, according to the indictment. Prosecutors say after the second loan was rejected, Merritt filed for a PPP loan in 2021 for the Courtney Merritt business and claimed it generated $128,000 in gross income and employed 10 people, something the DOJ says was falsified. Prosecutors say Merritt misrepresented the number of employees and forged supporting documents in order to receive a higher loan amount.
That's fucked up, man.
This led to a payout of nearly $21,000, which was forgiven by the government when Merritt claimed he spent the money on payroll costs. Under purpose of the scheme to defraud in the indictment, prosecutors say Merritt would attempt to file and cause the filing of materially false applications and requests for an EIDL and PPP funds, which he was not entitled to receive, and to spend the fraudulently obtained money totaling over $20,832 for his own benefit and enjoyment. Lawyers for Merritt denied the allegations, releasing a statement saying Mr. Merritt intends to plead not guilty to the charges. As with any indictment, this is only the government's version of the story. We look forward to litigating this case in federal court in Washington, D.C. Merritt's wife, former Missouri Congresswoman Cori Bush, served 2 terms representing St. Louis before losing her seat in the 2024 Democratic primary. She is not named in the indictment and has not been accused of any wrongdoing.
What a bunch of dumbasses.
Yeah, really.
For more than an hour today, President Donald Trump held a high-stakes phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The White House saying after the call that ceasefire negotiations with Russia will begin immediately in the Middle East. Meanwhile, the Kremlin saying that President Putin told President Trump that America and its allies must end their military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine in order to achieve a ceasefire. Scripps News international correspondent who reports regularly from Ukraine, Jason Bellini, he's now live for us at the White House. Jason, obviously, news moving a mile a minute here. What did we learn from that phone call?
Hi, Nate. Well, the world's been waiting for information on what happened in that phone call. And after a high-level meeting like this, you get what's called a readout, typically from both sides. So let's start with the Trump readout of this meeting. And the main headline here is that Trump says that they're going to begin with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire. Now, actually, let me jump now to what the Kremlin is saying on that specific notion of a ceasefire. They say that Putin has actually put into place orders for an immediate ceasefire when it comes to energy and infrastructure. So that's very significant, obviously, as a first step potentially. This is not the full 30-day ceasefire. It doesn't have, it appears, implications immediately for what's happening on the front lines, but this could actually be to Russia's benefit, this type of ceasefire, because Ukraine, one area they've been having a lot of success lately is with hitting Russian oil refineries. We're seeing almost every day these long-range attacks from Ukrainian drones. Now, of course, Russia's been attacking Ukraine's infrastructure. That's been happening for years, and they've had enormous success in that, and it's had a major detrimental effect. But that appears that is coming first, and then they're going to be working towards a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea. I'll point out that also could be to Russia's benefit because Ukraine has developed these drones, these sea drones, that have made large parts of the Black Sea coast along Ukraine no-go zones for Russia's military, for their naval assets. Ukraine's had enormous success with taking out those assets. So those are the first things that we're seeing here, Nate.
Yeah, the Financial Times in the last couple of moments, we're trying to confirm this ourselves, get our Russian speakers looking at the statements. They're reporting that Putin has ordered Russia's military to refrain from striking Ukrainian energy infrastructure for 30 days, that Putin agreed to that on this call. Does that mean that some of the strikes by Russia will likely end, or does that just mean a possible new phase of the war?
Well, my read on that is that the long-range strikes, which are typically done with Shahed drones and ballistic and cruise missiles on energy infrastructure. And I just got back from Ukraine, and those were happening almost every night. Those apparently will cease. But again, in exchange, and we don't have a reaction yet from Ukraine to this, from President Zelensky, who's actually traveling right now to Finland, whether they're on board with this. But that would mean that Ukraine's long-range attacks on Russia's infrastructure would stop as well. But right now, the more critical thing is the fighting that's happening in areas like the Kursk region, where Russia's been pushing Ukrainian forces out and where the Ukrainians have been taking major casualties. As we understand it, there's no ceasefire there.
Yeah, it's interesting just reading through this preliminary translation here from the Kremlin. Sounds like there will also be a prisoner exchange as well. 175 people for 175 people, plus some seriously wounded Ukrainian service members transferred back to Ukraine. Certainly a win for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in some cases. But if Putin does agree to a longer-term ceasefire, a more comprehensive ceasefire, which we understand those negotiations just now in the early phases, how would that be monitored and enforced? I mean, is that something that you view as possibly enforceable from both sides?
That's a really good question. But before I answer that, there's something I'd be remiss in not mentioning. Putin has told Trump, this is according to the Kremlin, that the U.S. and its allies and other allies of Ukraine must end military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine immediately. That's one of his conditions. Whether the U.S. and its allies are amenable to that, we don't know. Is that a condition upon which the halt of attacks on energy infrastructure is contingent? We just don't know that right now. But back to your question, how would a ceasefire be enforced? too early to tell. There's no indication yet from the readouts from the White House and from Moscow on what that would look like. All we know is that they're going to immediately, they say, immediately begin negotiations in the Middle East. Presumably that would happen in Saudi Arabia on a 30-day ceasefire, towards a 30-day ceasefire. So it sounds like Russia's demanding that there be serious conditions upon the idea of a true ceasefire, because what we have right now, this is a very, I think we can characterize it, if this all holds true, as a limited ceasefire at the moment, Nate.
President Trump is currently on the phone with Ukrainian President Zelensky, talking about the potential ceasefire with Russia, and also the phone call that President Trump had with Russian President Putin. You're taking a live look right there of the White House as that discussion currently happening right now in the Oval Office. The latest is that Zelensky saying today that a vow by Russian President Putin not to attack energy infrastructure was, quote, very much at odds with reality following an overnight barrage of drone strikes across the country. So Zelensky did say that he would be speaking with President Trump. We do know that phone call is happening right now inside the Oval Office in the White House, talking about President Trump's phone call with Putin yesterday about that ceasefire, and also to discuss the next steps that should be taken. Russia said that it had halted its targeting of Ukraine's energy facilities and accused Kyiv of attacking equipment near one of its pipelines. A Kremlin spokesman saying, quote, unfortunately, we see that for now there is no reciprocity on the part of the Kyiv regime. Russian strikes, which hit civilian areas and damaged a hospital, followed Putin's refusal to back a full 30-day ceasefire during discussions with President Trump. The White House has described the call between President Trump and Putin as the first step in a, quote, movement to peace that Washington hopes will include a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea and eventually a full and lasting end to the fighting.
Talks have started in Saudi Arabia between US and Russian negotiators on a ceasefire in Ukraine that could have global implications for commodity prices. The White House says the priority is a maritime ceasefire that would allow shipping to flow freely in the Black Sea. Now, you may remember a deal was struck back in 2022 that allowed Ukraine to export its grain through the Black Sea, and Russia pulled out of it the following year. It's not clear just how genuinely President Putin is ready to compromise now. He's continued to make demands that Ukraine could never agree to.
Tonight, a South African research team based in Antarctica, almost completely cut off from the world, now allegedly facing a threat from within. In an email obtained by the Sunday Times of South Africa, one of the 10 team members describing one colleague physically attacking another, threatening to kill them, and sexually assaulting a different colleague. According to the Sunday Times, the email says there's now an environment of fear and intimidation on the base. The crew member writing, it is imperative that immediate action is taken to ensure the safety of all employees. South Africa's Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment confirming to the outlet it has launched an investigation. NBC News has not independently verified the email. The team is living at the Sinai 4 research base, roughly 2,700 miles from the southern tip of South Africa. The crew is slated to spend 15 months on the base, conducting research that includes climate monitoring, atmospheric studies, and geological surveys, according to the program's website. Over the winter, they live mostly in isolation, with travel nearly impossible due to weather conditions.
Basically, it's down to the team on the ice. They've got to sort themselves out, because once the winter starts, effectively you are completely isolated.
Antarctica is the coldest place on Earth, reaching more than 120 degrees below zero, with winds that can top 115 miles per hour.
The weather is not the big issue, because you dress for the weather, so you have the right clothing. So the environment isn't really what you're faced with. It's the isolation and the need to get on with the people you're wintering with.
In recent years, sexual violence on the continent has come into sharper focus, with a study from the National Science Foundation finding nearly 6 in 10 women experienced harassment or assault during their time on the continent. Now fears growing for another team facing more than just the frozen hellscape at the ends of the earth.
As we are following breaking news out of the D.C. area, I want to head back live to Fairfax County, Virginia. This is a live look right here, and you can see that the photographer now panning in on a drone right outside this scene right here. This is a live look near a large police presence near the CIA headquarters. Right now, the photographer panning in on that drone right here. But take a look at this. This is just 2 blocks away from the CIA headquarters in Fairfax County, Virginia. You can see just how many police officers and vehicles are stationed there right now. A very large police presence, currently just 2 blocks away from CIA headquarters in McLean, Virginia. This is the very latest. As you can see, there does appear to be a SWAT team alongside county officials as they gear up along with other officials. A bomb squad, according to Fox 5 DC, also appears to be on the scene, although it is unconfirmed if there is a bomb in the area. There are reports also of a man outside the CIA building. This, of course, has raised concerns, and you're taking a live look at an armored vehicle, one of the tanks right there, used in SWAT situations.
This morning, reaction growing after the Trump administration released thousands of pages about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Joining us now, someone who has been going through the files, Jefferson Morley, editor of the J.F.K. Facts and Substack and vice president of the Mary Farrell Foundation. Jefferson, thanks so much for being with us, Jefferson. What are your takeaways so far? There's a lot of this, and a lot of this is not really organized.
Yeah, so we spent last night going through the 2,000 or so documents, and I got to tell you, Lincoln, there's a sensational story here that people need to know. This is not a nothing burger, as people will tell you. There's an amazingly interesting and pregnant story in these JFK files. Let me explain. Late last night, we got the unredacted testimony of CIA counterintelligence chief James Angleton, who testified behind closed doors to Senate investigators in 1975. Up till yesterday, about 40 pages of the 113-page transcript were redacted. All of those redactions have come off, and we see a new window into the CIA's pre-assassination surveillance of Lee Harvey Oswald. One document, FBI document released yesterday, indicates that Angleton recruited Lee Harvey Oswald as a 20-year-old Marine as a contact or a source for the CIA in 1959. Other documents released in recent years show that Angleton kept Oswald under surveillance, monitoring his politics, his personal life, his foreign travels, his contacts for the next 4 years, from November 1959 to November 1963. By November 1963, we now know, thanks to these documents, Angleton had a 180-page file on Oswald on his desk a week before Kennedy went to Dallas. So what this story raises is the question, was the CIA incredibly, atrociously incompetent when it came to Lee Harvey Oswald? Or was Angleton actually running an operation involving Oswald? We don't have the answer to that question because there's still some relevant records to come out. For example, one file of another CIA officer who was involved in the pre-assassination surveillance of Oswald is still kept secret. So this is a great first start. There's an incredible story here, but we need to do more research.
A verdict this morning in a massive case of fraud. Hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars that was supposed to help children in need was stolen. It was a 6-week trial, but the jury needed only 5 hours to decide the fate of the woman held responsible.
A jury in Minnesota has found the ringleader of what's been called the largest pandemic-era fraud scheme in the country guilty on all charges. Amy Bach, the founder of Feeding Our Future, now convicted in a plot that stole nearly $250 million from a federal program meant to feed children in need.
Her efforts to lie, to blame others, to escape responsibility, all came to an end. What Bach and her co-defendants did was reprehensible.
Bach, along with co-defendant Salim Saeed, convicted on conspiracy, wire fraud, and bribery charges. They're 2 of 70 defendants accused of falsifying meal counts, invoices, and attendance rosters, claiming to have served food to thousands of kids per day across Minnesota, all to get reimbursed with hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars.
These are criminals that preyed on a system that was meant to feed children.
Instead of feeding children, Bach and Saeed allegedly created dozens of shell companies to receive the money and launder it, all to fund their lavish lifestyles, buying luxury cars and real estate. Authorities so far have recouped only $60 million of the $250 million stolen.
We just need to make sure that we put up more firewalls, more security, more ability to make sure that these criminals aren't able to prey on this.
Both are held without bail, expected to face substantial prison time when they're sentenced.
Chinese President Xi Jinping reportedly furious over a Hong Kong company's plan to sell its Panama Canal ports to a U.S. group led by BlackRock. The Wall Street Journal reports Xi originally wanted to use the canal as a bargaining chip when dealing with President Trump. China and Hong Kong now are threatening the $23 billion deal to purchase 2 ports near the Panama Canal, currently owned by Chinese firm C.K. Hutchison. BlackRock did the deal, acquired several ports, including those 2. The company's chief executive says the deal deserves serious attention, saying, quote, "The Hong Kong government urges foreign governments to provide a fair and just environment for enterprises. We oppose the abusive use of coercion and bullying tactics in international economic and trade relations." Joining me now is the Gatestone Institute senior fellow and author of Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, Gordon Chang, back with me. Gordon, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Maria.
So I would have thought that Li Ka-shing, who runs C.K. Hutchison, would be someone that the Chinese would be proud of. He's among the richest people in the world, has done incredibly well. But he did a deal with Larry Fink and BlackRock to sell port companies, including those 2 ports operating near the Panama Canal. Suddenly, the head of Hong Kong is upset about it. Your reaction?
Well, when John Lee, the chief executive of Hong Kong, says, oh, we're opposed to international bullying, that's exactly what Xi Jinping is doing to C.K. Hutchison, because China is now threatening anti-monopoly regulations against C.K. Hutchison. And remember, this deal is really important because it is 43 port operations with 199 berths in 23 countries. And this shows you that China's position around the world is fragile. President Trump scored a major victory, and now Xi Jinping is just stewing about it, probably with very little that he can actually do.
The latest now on Elon Musk's expanding role in the Trump administration. The New York Times reported yesterday that he was set to visit the Pentagon to get a briefing on Chinese war plans. That may have been reversed at this point, but he is still going to the Pentagon. I want to get all the details from Martha Raddatz, Chief Global Affairs Anchor. Good morning, Martha.
Good morning, George. The New York Times had reported late last night that Elon Musk would be briefed at the Pentagon today on top secret plans for any potential war with China, which would be an extraordinary expansion beyond the D.O.G.E responsibilities, given his business connections to China and the fact that those are very closely held secrets. But overnight, a fury of denials from the Trump administration, the president claiming the story is completely untrue, and Elon Musk calling the story pure propaganda, saying leakers will be prosecuted. But what is true is that Elon Musk will be at the Pentagon today. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth denying the meeting will be about China war plans. Instead, Hegseth saying it will be an informal meeting about innovation and efficiencies. Although last night an official did tell ABC News that China would at least be mentioned in this meeting, and the meeting would be with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It is unclear whether that is true anymore, Rebecca, but we do know Hegseth will be at the White House. Rebecca?
And we also know how important China is to Musk and his business Tesla, which had record sales there last year.
Now to the investigation into the death of a former federal prosecutor in Virginia. Police responded to reports of an unresponsive woman and found 43-year-old Jessica Aber at a home in Alexandria, Virginia. She served as U.S. attorney for most of the Biden administration and then resigned the day President Trump took office. More now from ABC's Alex Perche.
Tonight, an investigation into the tragic and unexpected death of a former U.S. attorney in Virginia.
Any additional units to assist fire for the cardiac arrest. Female found in bed, unresponsive, not breathing.
43-year-old Jessica Aber was found unresponsive inside her home by Alexandria police Saturday morning. Sources tell ABC News so far there's no indication of foul play and that the death appears to have been from natural causes. The state medical examiner will determine her cause of death. Attorney General Pam Bondi posting to X, "The loss of Jessica Aber is deeply tragic. Our hearts and prayers go out to her family and friends during this profoundly difficult time." Aber was appointed by former President Biden as the top prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia in 2021. She and her staff of roughly 300 prosecuted a number of high-profile cases, including cyber and drug cases. She also prosecuted war crimes in Ukraine.
We at the Eastern District of Virginia are proud to stand with the Criminal Division as part of the Department of Justice's efforts to hold perpetrators of war crimes violations accountable.
Aber resigned January 20th of this year when President Trump took office. Her successor at the Eastern District called her a mentor and a proud Virginian since high school, saying that she loved the Eastern District and the Eastern District loved her back.
Former U.S. Representative Mia Love of Utah, a daughter of Haitian immigrants who became the first Black Republican woman elected to Congress, died Sunday. She was 49. Love's family posting this news of her death on Love's X account. I want to transition and show that to you. Take a look. It is cut off at the bottom, so I will read it in full on this end. It says, quote, "With grateful hearts filled to overflowing for the profound influence of Mia on our lives, we want you to know that she passed away peacefully today. She was in her home surrounded by family. In the midst of a celebration of her life and an avalanche of happy memories, Mia quietly slipped the bands of mortality and, as her words and vision always did, soared heavenward. We are thankful for the many good wishes, prayers, and condolences. We are taking some time as a family and will provide information about funeral services and a public celebration of her life in the days to come."
This just in, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, says he was accidentally texted war plans.
Yeah, we literally just received this piece from The Atlantic, and in it, Goldberg writes, U.S. national security leaders included me in a group chat about upcoming military strikes in Yemen. I didn't think it could be real. Then the bombs started falling. CNN's Alex Marquardt joins us now live. And Alex, this piece came out literally in the last few minutes. Ago. I haven't been able to read through all of it, but this seems like something out of a farce, like out of a comedy.
It is just stunning on so many different levels. And I understand why Goldberg didn't believe it was real, because it is just shocking in several different ways. Goldberg was added to a Signal chat with some of the most senior national security members of the Trump administration. Signal is a messaging app that is encrypted, probably why these officials thought that they could have a discreet conversation on there. But on it, in this chat that Goldberg was a witness to, they talk about the planning for the recent bombing of the Houthis that started on March 15th. They talk about current intelligence assessments. There's a full-on debate among these officials about whether they should carry out this bombing of the Houthis. And these are conversations that could be in violation of the Espionage Act. Now, this group was started, it looks like, by the National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, who called it the Houthi PC Small Group. PC refers to Principals Committee. The principals in the administration are the senior-most officials. And among that group of senior officials, you have the National Security Advisor, the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense and of State, the Director of National Intelligence, the CIA Director, Steve Witkoff, the Special Envoy, the Chief of Staff to President Trump, and the list goes on. There are 18 of them. So there's this debate over whether the U.S. should go through with this bombing of the Houthis. Vice President Vance is actually arguing against it. saying that just 3% of trade goes through the Red Sea, which is where the ships have been targeted by the Houthis. Ratcliffe, the CIA director, he chimes in with current intelligence assessments that may be related to intelligence operations that are ongoing. Goldberg does not print that because, of course, that, among so many other details in this, are so highly classified. Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, he chimes in saying that waiting a few weeks or a month wouldn't fundamentally change the calculus. And he notes, interestingly, that if this leaks, we look indecisive. Of course, it would eventually leak. Now, keep in mind, as they're having this discussion, Goldberg is watching all of this unfold, and he doesn't know, again, whether it's real, but he would quickly learn that it was. On the morning of March 15th, which is the day the bombings began, Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, posted a team update at 11:44 in the morning saying the bombings were about to start 2 hours later. And in that message to this large group, again, including Goldberg, he posted operational details about these strikes that were about to happen, information about targets, about weapons, and the attack sequencing. 2 hours later, the strikes started. Goldberg looked up on Twitter, and he started to see explosions happening in Yemen, and that's when he knew it was true. And that's when these officials essentially started celebrating. You have John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, saying, "A good start." Mike Waltz, this national security advisor, responds with several emojis, as does Steve Witkoff, with 2 hands praying, a flexed bicep, and 2 American flags. So everyone approving of what just happened and celebrating. The National Security Council has not pushed back on this at all. They said that this chain was in fact real. Brian Hughes, the National Security Council spokesman, says this does appear to be an authentic message chain. They are looking into how and someone was inadvertently added, how Goldberg was added to this chain, and he tries to spin it as a demonstration of the deep and thoughtful policy coordination between senior officials. So no pushback from the White House in terms of the authenticity of this. But again, this may violate the Espionage Act. Jeffrey Goldberg and his colleague Shane Harris, who's an intelligence reporter, spoke with several lawyers who say that it may have violated the provisions that govern the handling of national defense information. Bottom line, they say,
to put it on Signal,
they should not have established a Signal chat in the first place, is their conclusion, which is kind of obvious. And then the kicker of this whole piece is, as Hegseth is describing how this is going to unfold and what is going to happen, he says, we are currently clean on OPSEC, which is operational security. Clearly, they were not clean because they included a journalist in this conversation on Signal.
And that's the game!
You've disconnected from the hive mind. Explain.